Hey everybody, Mike Verkest Ratusani back at it again. This time we're live. It's a beautiful Sunday night. Dr. Sani, how are you doing?
I'm very good. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing good. It was a nice lazy Sunday today.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Oops.
I mean, we did some stuff, but mostly I just got ready for this. So it was nice.
I slept.
Yeah, you worked all night.
I worked all night. And so I worked a late swing Friday night, and then I worked all night last night. So I missed the live you guys did last night because I was taking my pre overnight shift nap.
Yeah. How you feeling right now? I know you're usually an emotional wreck after your overnights.
Yeah, usually after one, I'm okay. Certainly after two, it's kind of a journey for my wife. But
yeah.
And then every once in a while, I'll work 3 overnights in a row. And usually I end that third overnight like that. By that evening, I'm rolled up on the couch, crying and rocking back and forth. So,
yeah. Well, welcome everybody to our I am super excited about this special edition. This is something that Dr. Sani and I have been talking about for 5 years. And we've had multiple dedicated episodes of the Second Shift and even a Flight Bridge Ed or 2 podcast about DEA rules. So just 2 days ago, maybe 3 days ago, I don't remember.
It's a week now, I think.
It's been a week?
Yeah, I think it was like Monday.
Dang it. I was thinking we were a little more hot to trot on this. But anyway.
Yeah. I actually got the preview like a week and a half ago. But
oh, well, thanks for telling me.
Sorry.
Need to work on his communication skills. Nonetheless, we finally got the beta draft rules, which, by the way, are open for public comment. So after we get done on this, if you guys listen, you need to share this video right now because I'm telling you, this is going to affect every EMS provider out there,
Absolutely.
every agency. So get this word out to people, right? Meow, because I'm telling you, this is going to be
right. Meow.
And, yeah. I don't know. It's something I hear people say, but anyway, nonetheless,
I've never heard that before.
The podcast that we did that was a dual release, Flight Bridge Ed and Second Shift, is still to this day one of the most downloaded episodes ever at Flight Bridge Ed, ever, because it's that important. People were super interested in it. So we get to talk about the draft rules. Dun, dun, dun.
Do you have the video of the?
I wish I did have some like cool.
What's the little like squirrel turning its head?
Yeah, exactly. There'll be some of that tonight. But first of all, as we always double check with, what's in your cup?
So I just as I said, I worked overnight.
Yeah.
So I just finished my morning coffee, Darth Vader mug.
Okay, good.
I have now gone to my afternoon drink. Because I was still finishing my coffee during our prep time and had about 2 minutes, I just ran and got myself another Mirror Pond Pale Ale.
Yeah.
I love the Deschutes.
Well, good. So I've got some Diet Pepsi and some Double Oaks Noble bourbon that one of my best friends, Dr. Ratusani, got for me. It's delicious.
Good. I haven't had it before. I just saw it. I was in the liquor store.
Yeah.
When you were bringing me the cheese.
Yes, the cheese. The sharing of the cheese.
The sharing of the cheese. And I don't think the episode where we discussed the sharing of the cheese is out yet.
No, it's not. Our podcast publishing fella, Evan, PPF, podcast publishing fella. That's the acronym. It's in the FEMA stuff. Check it out. Anyway, went to like Disney World. And so here we are. So after tonight, we're going to have like 3 podcasts ready to go. It's going to be great.
I know. We got the one about where we talk about the cheese.
Yep. There's the cheese
recap of the fires.
That's turned into its own episode.
Yeah.
All right. People are like, shut up about the cheese and the fires. God damn. Let's go. Let's get on. Looks like Dr. Jarvis joined us. Hello, Jeff. Good to see you.
Hey, Jeff. Right.
The first thing I want to talk about that we thought was important is we need to go back in time, and we need to turns out about 5 or 6 years back in time. Yes. So we're going to go back. We're going to go back to, let's just pretend it's 2013. Remember those days when you could go to restaurants and live sporting events and concerts? It was awesome.
2013.
Anyway, long time ago. One of their funny little things that you used to do was ask people, hey, have you read up on the rules the DEA rules as it pertains to EMS. And most often somebody would be, hell yeah, I've read them front to back multiple times.
I know them all.
I know them all.
And forwards. We have a good friend that would adamantly declare that he knew them.
Yes.
All.
Knew them front to back. Yes. To which you would always relish in the fact of getting to say,
there are no DEA rules.
There are no rules. You're full of shit. Maybe not in so many words.
Well, with this person, I love to tell him he's full of shit.
That's true. That's true. But nonetheless,
it's called being a friend.
Yes. You, me, everybody else out there who thought we were following the rules into our controlled substances, and we're probably doing the right thing, doing what has always been done, like passed down through those generations. I know that for the most part, that at least the agencies I've been at, is we have done this since 1995. We always did a good job of tracking when it came in, tracking when it's used, tracking when it's disposed of, and there was always good, tight documentation. Even though there was nothing telling us that's what we had to do, somehow, somewhere along the line, we learned how to manage controlled substances, as it would turn out, without any direction or guidance or rules from the DEA on how to do that. But yet we all sort of, kind of managed-ish.
We did. The problem came down to when there were issues. Exactly. And when there were issues, then nobody knew where to turn to for, like, you broke this rule or that rule, because there was no rule.
And then so the plot thickens even more. And Joey's saying, hey, Mike's camera's working tonight. Yes. Thank you for that. Thank you for that reminder of the Absolute S show that was last night's live. Anyway, so not only did that create a problem for that agency, how exactly do I deal with this? So they dealt with it the best way they know how, but it also put the DEA in a strange position because there were no rules for those agents to figure out how to assist you, to find you, to pat you on the head and say, well, it was a good try. It was handled completely different everywhere across the country. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Am I being cross-examined?
No.
Yes,
Your Honor. Well, I'm just saying, how do you operate in such an area? Like, what do you do? It creates a real problem.
Yeah, and then there were a couple of cases sort of notable issues. There was a case in Texas. There were a couple cases in Texas, which I heard is a delegated practice state.
Yeah. Can you confirm that, Dr. Jarvis or Dr. Pickett, anybody?
But there was a case where, and it's a sad case. The executive director of an EMS agency was diverting large quantities of drugs for his wife, who was dying of cancer. Sad, but illegal. And the medical director figured this out, and so notified the DEA. So one of the other pieces is that the DEA, in many situations, because there's no such thing formally as an EMS DEA registration, most places had the medical director had their own DEA that was on the line.
Yep.
And so this medical director kind of said to the DEA, dude, I think we've had a big diversion problem here. I know I'm obligated to tell you. And the DEA said, hey, that's great. Thanks. Hey, well, this is your fault, right? Because you're the medical director and it was your registration. And so we're going to fine you $1 million. And that was sort of like one of the big red flags. And ultimately that person didn't end up having to pay $1 million. But the idea that as a medical director, I'm personally and individually responsible. And, as a good medical director should have, we all have insurance, but the insurance doesn't cover like your fines for a DEA thing. Yeah. So that was a big red flag. And then as practices change, as practices were becoming more and more variable, I always use Wake. And some of the examples I use are like Wake County, where they had to have a DEA registration for like every apparatus.
Right.
And they had to they Brent was their medical director. They had to get a distributor's license, which is a significantly different registration than a provider. And
it's
they had a
pharmacy, right?
Yeah, is exactly what it is. They had to be a pharmacy. And when they put their DEA, when they put their controlled substances out on the rigs, they had to fill out a 222 form from themselves. Dave Pearce, Houston, says he has like 49 separate DEA numbers because they told him he had to have one for every fire engine. So just this variability of practice.
So, and really, as these issues started cropping up and just, I guess, coming to the forefront where people would see him, the DEA sort of reached out. And God, what was this? Had been October of 2014 or 15. This is where we had a conversation. 14, right?
Yeah. So in October 2014, the DEA started a conversation. They came to an ASEP meeting where I attended as I was NAMSP president.
Yeah.
And they started talking to ASEP and NAMSP about these issues. And then they came to the NAMSP meeting in January of 2015 in New Orleans and met with the NAMSP board, the executive director, the executive committee. So we were all sat in my little suite in New Orleans and met with the DEA about these issues.
And the DEA had some interesting things to discuss, right? And they basically said, I mean, I guess I can just paraphrase. You were the one in the room, so maybe I should just leave it to you. What did they tell you in that suite in New Orleans that fateful January 2015?
Well, what they told us was that they have to, when they create the EMS rules, they have to follow the existing Controlled Substances Act, the statute, the law written by Congress. And the law requires every administration of a controlled substance to have a real-time either physician's verbal order, written order, or prescription. So that based on that law, which they couldn't change, that standing orders or protocols were illegal. And we even had a couple of local DEA agents. We heard some stories that some local DEA agents were starting to tell their local EMS people that what you're doing is against the law. And so that caused a little bit of a kerfuffle in the EMS world.
Yeah. So essentially the way it really, at the end of the day, at that meeting, and this is the part I remember because we've talked about this so much, some of it sticks with me, some better than others, but you were like, essentially the EMS folks in the room were like, that's not going to work for us. And basically they said, change the law.
They had to be careful, right? So they can't advocate for a statutory change.
Of course not. So
they said repeatedly, we can only do what the law tells us to do. And then we had a follow-up conference call with them like a month later. And they were like, no, well, and we were just like, this is going to crush emergency medicine.
Right.
We were like, let's say you're out in the wilderness and you get injured and there's no cell phone. So do we have to truck your broken pelvis back 30 miles without, and their response was not, they weren't defensive at all. They were like, we can only do what the law tells us to do. And then the big light went off. Well, shit, then we got to fucking change the law. There Perfect. You go.
And that's a super easy process. You just go change the law.
You just go to www.changethelaww.com.
Right. And then you just put in what you want. And then, no, that's not how it works at all.
No.
So this is where advocacy comes in. This is where having champions, having connections. We've talked about sort of being friends with your local politicians, your state representatives, all these kind of people. And so if we fast forward, let's go back a little bit. So those are the discussions that are having at ASEP and NAMSP. So come January or February, see, this is where I'm going to get my thing screwed up because I didn't read my notes very good, because we had a last minute change on the year. So it was 2016 the bill was introduced. Is that right?
Correct.
Yes.
January of 2016. So between that thing that happened in 2015, beginning of 2015, what we had to do was sort of we decided we had to change the law. And so NEMSP was in the process of firming up their lobbying. We talked a lot about lobbying. It costs a lot of money.
Right.
To have a lobbyist, and we had made the commitment during my presidency that we were going to maintain that, and so we had continued to work with a firm called Holland and Knight and my friend Lisa Hawk, and Lisa kind of went out and did her lobbying thing along with Miranda and found a couple champions in Congress, both on the House side and the Senate side, to listen to our story, because remember, facts are important when making policy decisions, but stories are what move legislation. And Representative Hudson, along with Representatives Butterfield and Ruiz, Hudson and Butterfield from North Carolina, Ruiz, an emergency physician, Pittsburgh guy from California, introduced the actually it wasn't HR 304 at the time, but the Protecting Patient Access to Emergency Medications Act. So we really spent all of 2015 kind of working with NAMT and ACEP and working with Representative Hudson and his legislative director Preston Bell to come up with bill language, work with our partners to make sure the language was amenable to everybody involved. And then in that sort of year-long process, probably 10 months, culminated in Representative Hudson introducing the bill in January of 2016.
Yep. And it was, for the most part, this is what they considered, and I learned all this from you. This was a white hat issue, right? So It was a nonpartisan issue. This was something for the good of the people, essentially. So it actually went through the House pretty quick, unanimously, and then got moved to the Senate.
Right. One thing, it went through, it went through hearings in the House.
Yeah.
Craig Manifold, rest in peace. And Craig and representing ACEP and NAMT. And then I was supposed to go, but then they moved it, and I was on my vacation for my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. So Brent went, and so Craig and Brent testified before the House Energy and Commerce Committee about the bill, which was super cool. And then it got passed by the House unanimously, got pushed to the Senate, and basically died in the Senate because just sort of personal politics almost.
Yeah. So, so what did that mean? I remember being super excited it passed, because obviously we talk all the time, but specifically this, like when something would come up or something would pass or something happened, like you would text me and we'd be like, oh, this is great, whatever. And then I remember that, like you were saying, like if it does not get passed, like if the Senate does not vote on this, it's going to die, and then we're going to have to start all over. And sure enough,
it died. It died. The 2016 was an interesting year. There was a presidential election, which people may have heard about. I don't know what the outcome was, but they had so that Congress ended at the end of 2016, and each Congress is 2 years, and any bill that doesn't pass just dies.
Yep.
And they start the slate clean again.
So it has to be reintroduced, the whole 9 yards. It just has to start over.
Yep.
All right. So let's move along here. So 2017, it starts over, and there is some stuff that's happening. So EMS on the Hill happens again that March or April. Yep. So it's getting hit hard and heavy. And the first day it gets reintroduced and passes on the first day that the Congress was back in session.
Yeah, so it immediately, Representative Hudson immediately teed it up as a bill for the next session. So January 5th was the first day of the new Congress, and it got introduced and it got passed out of the House of Representatives before the week was out. So, under sort of a unanimous consent, kind of straight fast track, and then went pushed over to the Senate, where it sort of had to go through its paces again. It didn't need a hearing so much, but it required bureaucracy slows things down, and I think there's a purpose to that. And so, come October,
it was actually sent back to the Senate back to the House for some edits.
Yeah. So in October, it was passed by the Senate, some minor edits. And then since it wasn't, since the bill language wasn't exactly the same, it has to go back to the House. It went back to the House within the week, was reapproved. Because they have a lot of, we hear a lot about politics and floor fights and this and that, but the reality is the majority of the stuff that Congress does that actually gets done, a large chunk of it is done unanimously, and it's done quickly after sort of the fine percolating period. And so these things, once they kind of had their time to be vetted and approved, everybody was cool with them, they just kind of show up on an agenda and get passed unanimously very quickly. And that's what happened, when at the Senate and back at the House. So
it was very exciting, very cool.
Yeah, very cool.
It passes the Senate. Come November, Trump signs it into law. And then November of 2017, we have the new patient access to emergency medications that's passed. It's now the law.
Yep.
Just like the old cartoon, how the bill became a law.
Yep.
I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill. I know
that's pretty good. We did that in 20 minutes. Usually we can do like that for an hour and a half.
I know. Well, we got a lot of stuff to cover, but I think it was important to set the foundation as to what we're going to talk about next, which is the actual first draft of the rules that came out. And that's what I want to talk about. So the moment that this thing was signed, and we were talking about this before we came online, regardless of the fact if there was guidance on how to follow the law or not, it doesn't matter. The provisions within the law take effect in that moment. Is that right?
Right. Exactly. So the minute it was signed by the guy, the president dude.
It's so hard for you, and I appreciate how you just take it easy.
I didn't get my White House invite for that or anything.
Yeah.
As soon as it's signed by the president, there were provisions in that law that took effect right away. And the most important one was that it was legal to do standing orders.
Yes.
And that was the most important piece. That got done right away. As soon as it was signed, it was legal. We didn't have to worry about that. There was a lot of things in the law that required implementation. Right. So the law says it's legal to do standing orders. You don't need, then it's legal. But the law also says that you have to have a registration for EMS agencies. Well, that's not, turn on flip. Now that the agency in charge of that has to put in place a bunch of rules about, well, how do you apply? How much is it going to cost? And
exactly.
What does it mean? And so you have to implement those pieces too.
Does it take 3 years for that? 3 years?
Not usually. Not usually.
Okay. Are you restraining yourself there?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, there were a number of there were a number of issues that made it hard.
Yeah.
I would say that this particular this particular administration has not been kind to career government workers. And so there was at every level of every agency, a ton of turnover.
Yeah.
So we met with DEA people multiple times, and then we would find out that they were like gone, that they had retired or left or reassigned or whatever. And so the policy shop at the DEA that does these things seemed to have a lot of turnover. So it took a little while. There was also, a requirement there's an executive order that said that when you release a new set of rules, you have to remove 2 rules.
That's right.
And the DEA doesn't really have 2 rules they can remove. And so there was, I think, a lot of internal haggling around how to get around that. And if you read the notice, they actually discuss that in the notice about why this isn't affected by that.
Yeah. All right. Well, good stuff. So let me do a little rearranging on the screen here. Let's stand by for a sec.
Hopefully everybody's not asleep now.
All right. Let's see. That looks good. Does everyone see that slide that's up on here? I'm assuming so. Give me a thumbs up or something or other in the comments there. I'm pretty sure we're good. Yep, there it is. That looks good. There's a little bit of a delay on the program that we use, so it looks like it. All right. So, golly. So this is if you can do this while you're watching, like maybe you're on a laptop or something like that, you can kind of listen to us keep going. But all you need to do is just Google DEA rules, EMS, protecting patient access to medications, and it will bring you the very first thing that will come up is the draft rules or the beta rules that they will call it. I might be able to put it in the comments here while we're talking about it, but I have a lot of moving parts here for me to do 17 different things. It's kind of hard, but so if somebody, maybe Nick or somebody wants to throw the link in the comments on Facebook to the document, that would be awesome.
Yep.
But essentially what I tried to do here was we're just going to kind of summarize what, and there's a couple little ones that I missed here or there, but really I just wanted to get the words up on the screen for you guys. And then I figured we can just kind of discuss them as we are going through here and taking a peek at this stuff. Does that sound good to you, boss man?
It does. It does. I think the rules as they came out were, it was 18 pages of fun and really fine print on the Federal Register. But at the end of the day, I kind of thought they did a reasonably nice job.
Yeah, I mean, for being involved as I have been, obviously thanks to you and learning so much stuff because of you, and like I was able to get through this. It makes a lot of sense to me. There's a couple of head scratchers in there, which is sort of weird. Oh, okay, thanks, Nick. Looks like Nick put the link in the comments there. So if you're watching on Facebook, you can find that link. It's federalregister.gov. And then emergency medical services, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, you can go on there and find that because it's going to become important that you go to this document if you're watching this at some point, okay, and share this with your friends. But anyway, I felt like I got through here. There's a couple of head-scratching things that I just don't get, and we'll talk about those as we go. But other than that, I figured we could just start with a quick summary. Does that sound good to you?
That sounds great. We just kind of pop through. This is very unlike us to have slides and words.
I know we have words. And for those of you that want to criticize me for having slides with bullet points, Tyler, we're talking about federal registration. We're talking about rules, right? So I didn't want you to get my spin on it. I wanted you to actually see the words for themselves, which are pretty much copied and pasted, with the exception of there's a lot of references to like other subsection B, paragraph G. Well, I just took that stuff out to kind of simplify.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the first part. The Act established uniform EMS agency requirements for the administration of controlled substances while ensuring adequate safeguards against theft and diversion. The Act makes 5 key changes. So these are the first things that we're going to talk about. The first one is the Act creates a new registration category under the CSA, which is a Controlled Substance Act, for EMS agencies, directing the Attorney General, thus the administrator of the DEA or delegation, to register such an agency under the Controlled Substance Act if the agency submits an application demonstrating that it is authorized to conduct emergency medical services under the laws of each state in which the agency practices. So, what does this mean? What's your take on this particular first bullet point here, Dr. Sani?
So this was the fundamental issue in a lot of ways. There were no EMS specific rules and no EMS specific registration. This makes it very clear that the registration is the agency's responsibility and not the medical director's responsibility. There's other pieces.
This was a big win. Like, this is a big deal.
This is a very big deal. And it was accomplished because all of the EMS community thought this made sense. And, it's interesting because usually if you go to somebody and say, well, we're going to change the authority, we're going to change the requirement, if you will, to you from me, they're all like, no, I like it with you. But we went to our partners at the International Association of Fire Chiefs and at the American Ambulance Association and said, we think it's stupid and actually kind of weird that the medical director as a person is responsible. And they both said, yeah, we've always thought that was weird. And we feel like we're responsible for this. We're on the hook for this anyway. So we don't have a problem with this. So that was kind of key. And that was very helpful. And there's if you look at what else happened, there are other things that help them out, I think, too. I will say the other piece, just kind of overall, I got to give Lisa Toffel, but now Lisa Hawk credit. When you write a statute, it literally takes an act of Congress to change a statute. So you don't want to write something with too much specificity, because if something like, if you wouldn't want to write in statute that you should provide this healthcare and you should provide this treatment for something, because those things can change. But on the other hand, if you're too broad, like too high up, the agency can kind of run wild and do whatever they want. So you got to find that nice framework. And this is why having a professional who's written legislation for a living is really helpful. We found, I think, a really good sweet spot in the law that basically tells the DEA, these are the things you need to do. And then the other thing we told them was, and then make rules around this so that it works. So we didn't provide a lot of specificity for some things. And there were other things where like, no, you have to create an EMS agency registration, for instance.
Yeah.
So that's number one. I
didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, I don't even know. Yeah.
All right, let's get on to number 2. All right. Second, the act directs the Attorney General, thus the administrator, to allow a registered EMS agency to obtain a single registration for each state in which the agency administers controlled substances, rather than requiring an agency to obtain separate registration for each location at which it operates within that state. Okay. Again, makes a little bit more sense, right?
Absolutely. No more, you have 5 stations, you have 47 engines, you need a DEA license. It's $731 a pop for each one of those. I'm sorry, DEA, they're not licenses, they're registrations, but it's unambiguous.
Yeah, exactly.
You're allowed one, you can have more. So if you're and I don't know what AMR is going to do in this state, whether they'll have just one. I suspect they will, because I know Randy. But if they wanted to have one for each sort of operation with a different medical director, they could have 3. But at the end of the day, they don't have to have one for every station, every agency. And then the other piece was hospital-based.
Yep.
The other one on this slide basically says that if you're a hospital-based EMS agency, you can just operate under the hospital's DEA, because that was another place where they were getting like mixed messaging. Like some local DEA offices were like, no, EMS is separate and you have all these rigs and you need a registration for your EMS part and you need one for every station. And this allows like the hospital-based EMS agency to say, nope, we're just part of this hospital. So again, this is just clear. You can't overcharge them. And I think that's really good.
Yep. All right. The third one, subject to certain restrictions, the act authorizes EMS professionals of a registered EMS agency to administer controlled substances in Schedule 2, 3, 4, or 5 outside, and this is bold and highlighted and underlined in the whole 9 yards, outside the physical presence of a medical director or authorizing medical professional in the course of providing emergency medical services. So boom, this was the piece. This is the one that says you can use standing orders. And again, this was sort of done when the president signed it, but now we actually see the words. EMS professionals are only allowed to make such administrations if authorized by state law and pursuant to standing or verbal orders that satisfy a number of statutory conditions. Thoughts on this one?
I mean, this is it. This was the thing.
That was it.
Yeah. And the language in the regulation in the rule is pulled directly from the statute. So this was another one where we kind of all agreed on the statutory language so that it was straightforward.
I love that. All right, let's get on to the fourth. The Act provides a variety of requirements for how registered EMS agencies must deliver controlled substances from a registered to unregistered locations, store controlled substances, restock EMS vehicles at a hospital, maintain records, and otherwise conduct operations. Now, we'll get a little bit deeper into some of these as we'll kind of split these out as we go. But again, these were the main 5 headers that they were talking about. So we'll get into that a little bit more. And then finally, fifth, the Act specifically authorizes the Attorney General to issue regulations regarding the delivery and storage of controlled substances by EMS agencies. So at a quick glance, that was basically what we were looking at here. And I think I got ahead of myself here a little bit. No,
and I think if you read these, there's less specificity here, right? This just says you need to make rules around this. And the DEA was very concerned about diversion.
Yep.
And so we're like, in our meetings with them and their discussion of the topic, we're with you. We don't like diversion either, but we need like standards. We need to be able to all follow the same thing so that we're not getting pulled in 3 different directions. If you're a multi-state company like AMR or Falk, you're having multiple different sets of rules because every local DEA, we wanted some consistency, and we wanted people. This was never about shirking accountability, but it was about creating accountability that was understandable.
Absolutely. No, I think you hit it spot on. The next piece here, consistent with the Act, the DEA is proposing, which is what we're looking at, regulations to explicitly include EMS agencies handling controlled substances as registrants under the CSA, again, Controlled Substance Act, and to delineate the security and record-keeping requirements for EMS registrants who store, transport, and administer controlled substances, which is all of us, by the way, if you're not paying attention. They're talking about us right there.
Yep.
All right, let me get on to the next.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It really is kind of cool.
It is cool. I mean, there was a lot of work done by a lot of people to make this happen. So
well, and we don't really exist in federal law.
Right. Well, and certainly the term medical director never was a thing.
Right. This is the first federal law that recognizes an EMS medical director. This is the first federal law that really talks about EMS agencies. I mean, that's a thing. That's good.
And that is a great segue into another summary slide here. The Act thereby effectively amends the Controlled Substance Act to add a new category of registrant, an EMS agency. Ta-da! Sprinkle the pixie dust. Awesome. We made it. And to require the DEA to grant registrations to those agencies if certain conditions are met. Thus, in conformity with the Act, DEA proposes to amend 21 CFR. See, this is the stuff I told you. I deleted a lot of it. Well, I left some in for you. So 21 CFR 1301.13 and to add 21 to provide for the registration of EMS agencies. So this is really awesome. So we get to be our own thing, which I think is great. I think we've already talked about it. This takes a ton of heat off of the medical directors as far as this goes. And it's really just setting a great clean path for everybody.
Yeah. Now there are some people who will argue, well, wait a minute, my EMS agency already had a license or a registration, and they talk about that in the rules a little bit. And we've talked about this in the past. But there were states, and it required the state to allow this, but there were states that allowed EMS agencies to get a DEA registration under the mid-level provider certification.
Yep, that's on one of our upcoming slides here.
Okay, so we can talk about that further when we get there. I know I looked through these. I missed that one. So.
Yep, that's okay. So second bullet point there says the DEA recommends 3 options to allow EMS agencies to transition their registrations in accordance with the Act. The 3 options for EMS agencies to transition are, by the way, I just have to remind you, these are still beta rules. These are not final rules at all. These are all up to for discussion, up for your comments. These are, but like I said, these are not final by any means. So the stuff we're talking about tonight, this could change in a week or a month or God, who knows how long, right? But this could change. So just making sure everyone's aware that these are the beta rules. All right. So anyway, 3 options. Number 1, transition immediately on the effective date established by the DEA. So when these rules get released, boom, you just transition to that, right? Second, transition at the expiration of their current registration for those that have one already, like Dr. Sani mentioned. Or 3, transition 3 to 6 months prior to their renewal date. The DEA recommends that registrants contact their local DEA field office to complete this transaction. So there's 2 things that I don't hate about at least number 3. And that is reaching out to your local DEA field office.
Yeah.
And talk to them. Get to learn who they are. I got to tell you, we had the opportunity to do this probably 8 months, a year ago, maybe ish, something like that. And our logistics folks have now solidified and created a great working relationship with the Portland field office for the DEA as it pertains to EMS and controlled substances. It was a great conversation. Let me tell you, there was learning done on both ends, and it was awesome.
Well, I will tell you that I wasn't your medical director then, because I would have told you not to do it. But what we were finding was we were still, there was this period after the law was signed. Remember, we had to beat down rumors. There were rumors that the rules were already out. There were rumors that they were already registering EMS agencies. And the field office still had no guidance until these draft rules came out. And so I kind of said, I'm not sure you want to invite the DEA in until because you don't know what standard they're going to apply to you. And now I think it's totally different. I think now that these rules are out there, this draft rules, even if they change, we have an idea what they're going to look like. And this transition period, I think, is really important to work with your local DEA office on. Because as we get into some of the other details, there are some fine details that you're going to need to figure out as an agency. And working with the DEA to get these done kind of orderly is going to be really important.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's jump into the next one. This was distribution. So this one, you can see my bottom bullet point there, maybe, unless you're Jay-Z, who can't see it because the font's too small. You're quoting there, buddy. Anyway, listen to this one, guys. Many EMS agencies currently utilize what is sometimes termed as the hub and spoke model. That would be us. That's probably most places, right? You store it in a certain area and you deliver stuff out, right? Okay. Well, where the agency has a main or central location and several station houses managed by the main location. The station houses are strategically placed throughout a geographic area to provide timely responses to emergency medical needs of the residents in the area. Okay, here you go. Under the DEA's current regulations, if only the main location is registered with the DEA, the employees of each of the individual unregistered station houses are not allowed to acquire or store controlled substances at the unregistered station house. So what does that mean? This is a little bit of a trick because I'm not sure. I mean, I understand why they put this in here, and this is a little bit of a tease, but there's a solution for it.
Yeah, no, this is, I mean, what's interesting is, we store we have, I'll just use one of my other fire departments. Every station has a safe that keeps some meds there.
Yeah.
And so this technically illegal still under the rules.
Exactly. So let's go back a second. Well, actually I say go back, but let's go forward. So what is a facility? Designated facility. So this is where this is sort of our out on this, right? So basically what they're saying, enclosed structures housing EMS agency vehicles within the state of the emergency medical services registration, and which are actively and primarily being used for emergency response may be selected as a designated location by the EMS agencies that are registered for the DEA. So We've got our hub and spoke. Our hub is registered as the DEA's. That's our registered facility. Okay, there's two things: registered facility, designated facility.
Right.
Registered facility is going to be at my agency. That is our main logistics. That is it. That's our registered facility. Our stations, however, will be designated facilities. Therefore, we're good to go. I mean, that's kind of the short version of it. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think what this does is a couple of things. One, what they're saying is you don't have to have a separate DEA number for every station, but you sure as hell need to know where the stuff's going, right? And so as we get more into the rules and we talk about storage and things like that, the idea is that you basically get again, you already said it. You get your deliveries from the registered place.
Yep.
You can distribute it to designated facilities, and there are rules in place on how you're supposed to store them at designated facilities. Mm-hmm. Previously, the DEA only had rules around, like, if you were a distributor, or so again, like maybe the guy who told Wake, and I see Jay-Z's on, maybe the guy that told Wake that you were a distributor probably had it right in the sense that your registered facility needs some standards.
Yeah.
So it allows them to say, yes, you can put these meds in another place and you don't have to get a separate number and pay $731, but you're going to have to follow some rules at these places. Yeah. I think that's responsible and reasonable.
Yeah, agreed. All right, let's get on to the next one here.
And the process, from what I understand, the process for designating a facility will be to go onto their webpage. Yep. And you just list your designated facility. There's no approval.
Exactly.
You just list your designated facilities through the web portal.
Yep, exactly. Like Jay-Z said in the comments, a distributor allows you to hand out drugs to other agencies. So that makes sense. Yeah. All right. Oh gosh, excuse me. All right. There was another piece in there about vehicles, and that's under letter D, emergency medical services vehicles. Both the act and the proposed definitions of emergency services vehicles define EMS vehicles as ambulance, fire apparatus, supervisor trucks, or other vehicles used by an EMS agency for the purpose of providing or facilitating emergency medical care and transport, or transporting controlled substances to and from the registered and designated locations. Wow, that's a mouthful, right? Under the control of a consultant practitioner registration or hospital registration, controlled substances can be supplied to and stored in the EMS vehicle. One thing that we talked a little bit, let me finish this and we'll talk about it. Let's see here. Or in an EMS vehicle used by the agency that is traveling from or returning to a registered or designated location of the agency in the course of responding to an emergency, otherwise actively in use by the agency. Okay, that was a lot of stuff to talk about there, but what is this not telling us?
How they're stored in the vehicle.
How they're stored in vehicles. So that's a question I've gotten. If there's somebody that's reading this document right now and you're in there and you find that and maybe we missed it, it's entirely possible, throw it in the comments. But at least that's good, right? I mean, it's at least describing and letting us know that these vehicles are sort of official. We can keep those in there. We can store them in there. So is this another one of those? So I guess this is a question for you, and you may or may not know, but Wesley wants to know about aircraft. That's a really good question. It does not say aircraft, does it?
No, but it says or other vehicles.
But it does say ambulance, and so it's considered an ambulance, right? Air ambulance.
Well, so I mean, in like most states, the helicopter or the aircraft are licensed as ambulances,
right?
But it also says define EMS vehicles as ambulances, fire apparatus, supervisor trucks, or other vehicles used by an EMS agency for the purpose of providing or facilitating emergency medical care. So I think that kind of covers like all of that shit. Yeah. So I think helicopters. I think physician Jeff put in there, physician response vehicles.
Yes.
We got when I got to talk to Fred. When are we getting ours?
Yeah.
Yeah. So So those sorts of things. Nick says he read locker cabinet. I'm not sure that was in the vehicle though.
Yeah. I saw that too. It like literally says it needs to be a sturdy container that is permanently affixed, blah blah blah, or something like that. But yeah, I didn't see that as far
as the vehicle. That was to the designated site, right?
Right. So I don't know.
I think that one thing that I read when I read this, that's going to take a little bit of that takes a little bit of expansion of thought process. It's not specifically addressed in here, but I think it's okay. Is they still very much talked about a traditional model of almost a fire-based model of hub and spoke. What is really not discussed in any of their kind of discussion is a system status managed model, where there was one central station and you put the stuff on the vehicles for the day, and you're not responding to calls, you're just posting. Now, I do think that there was something in here. So in an EMS agency vehicle used by an EMS vehicle used by the agency that is traveling from, returning to a registered designated location of the agency in the course of responding to an emergency or otherwise actively in use by the agency. So to me, the otherwise actively in use by the agency would imply that if you are in a system status model where your ambulances are deployed and they're being moved from post to post, that would be actively in use by the agency. But I think my sense is in the comments, it may be worth asking that question or pointing that out.
Yeah.
So the background and all the stuff that you read in this doesn't really talk about sort of a system status managed model in general. Yeah. But I think it's okay, and I think it's covered by this.
All right, let's move on to the next one. A little bit on records and inventory. So I got the ellipsis there on both of these because there was some stuff that talked about it didn't really matter. So I just put the ellipsis there. But it says, while the registrant that received the controlled substances must account for the received controlled substances, every registrant is required to maintain complete and accurate records of each substance manufactured, imported, received, sold, delivered, exported, or disposed of. So I don't think that, again, I tend to think of agencies probably doing the right thing, the best they can. So I think most agencies are probably already doing something like this. I know at least mine is, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think we would expect it even in a world,
devoid of rules that you're kind of following it.
You're kind of following that. I would say that there are probably agencies that don't do this as well as they should.
Yeah. Bill Toon says, years ago when I worked in New York City, I carried narcotics on my person. That was back in the day right there.
Well, but I mean, one of my agencies, that's how they do. They still do it that way.
They keep them in their pocket.
They keep them in a pouch.
In their, like in a fanny pack?
Yeah.
I'm out.
It's an agency that you used to work for.
No, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on. Second bullet point, would require an EMS agency to maintain records for each controlled substance administered or disposed of in the course of providing EMS services, providing emergency medical services under the proposed blah, blah, blah. Any EMS personnel who disposes of or administers controlled substances to a patient in the course of providing emergency medical care must record the name of the controlled substance and provide detailed information about the circumstances surrounding the administration of the controlled substance. For example, the name of the substance, the date dispensed, identification of the patient. So I think we probably do that. We'll come back to it. EMS personnel do not have independent authority to administer controlled substances. Therefore, more stringent record-keeping requirements are necessary when allowing administration of controlled substances without direct oversight. So I put in there protocols. That's kind of what our protocols are for, right?
Yeah.
Like those guide us as to when to administer these medications. We're not doing it sort of willy-nilly.
And I guess the real question is going to be how much of the record that they're talking about is going to be, will the chart suffice for?
Well, you would think the chart would suffice because that's every bit of information we have on the patient, right?
I would think so, but I also think that if you are, I think good practice at the very least will be the idea that you can create a report that just has all this in it. Either in your charting software, or the charting software pushes it to a separate kind of drug piece. Just so that and there's another requirement that's going to make some of that going to make that there's another requirement on the medical director that we're going to talk about that's going to probably play a role in that we're hopefully will change some of that. But what they said in there, again, I thought that their description of kind of the what's and the whys and justifications was actually very nicely done. And they did say, look, this is a little bit of a risk to have these out here. So we really want good documentation.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's fine. We didn't, the one thing, did we mention, I can't remember if we mentioned this. No, we didn't mention, we mentioned this when we were talking about it in prep, but the other thing that they mentioned in their kind of justification was the role advocacy played in the creation of these.
Yeah.
So I felt really kind of, I got the Federal Register gave me a warm fuzzy when I read that. I'm like, hey,
how does that happen?
They talked about advocacy and the role it played in developing these rules.
Yeah.
And so I was very pleased and excited by that.
Yeah.
It's just nice to like put your heart and soul into something. And this is so fucking technical and specific, but it was a lot of work, and it was and it was in the scope of sort of like how things get done in Congress. It was actually probably I don't want to say easy lift, because it certainly wasn't, but it was a non-controversial lift, and it still took this long. I did tell Congressman Schrader, who is both of ours, right? I had a chance to meet with him this week and told him the rules just came out. He was also really supportive because he's a practicing veterinarian and had the same issues with controlled substance and veterinarians. And he's on the Energy and Commerce Committee and really helped us. I told him the rules came out this week. He's like, that took 3 years. I'm like, I know. He's like, government.
Yeah. All right.
Anyway.
It talks a little bit about storage here. So that's our next slide. So the DEA proposes to add a section to allow 2 options for storage components in which EMS agencies may store controlled substances. The change is not taken directly from the Act's statutory amendments to the CSA, but instead implements the Act's authorization to the Attorney General to specify the manner in which controlled substances must be stored, registered, and designated locations, including EMS vehicles. So it's a little ambiguous. Does that mean that there's more to come on this?
No, I think they were very specific to point out when they took language directly from the statute, and they still put it in the law, in the rule. And in this particular piece, again, the statute said, make rules about this. And so they're like, based on the statute, we have the authority to make these rules. So that's why we're making these rules that are not in the statute.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So they're just sort of justifying that they're allowed to make these rules and kind of do whatever they want here.
All right. So here's going on for some more storage. The first option in proposed 1301.80B1 would allow an EMS agency to store controlled substances in a securely locked, this is what we were talking about before, in a securely locked, substantial constructed cabinet or safe that cannot be readily removed. This storage component must be located at a secure location. Okay, we got to unpack this. We'll get back to it in a second. The second option in the proposed would allow EMS agencies to store controlled substances in an automated dispensing machine under specified or specific conditions. An ADS is a mechanical system that performs the operations or activities other than compounding or administration relative to the storage, packaging, counting, labeling, and dispensing of medications, and which collects, controls, and maintains all transactions in information. Okay, so is anyone out there actually going to be using one of these machines? Does anyone use one of these at their stations? Like, do they keep fentanyl in the machine? I don't know.
One of my agencies in another county already.
Really?
These are the machines that are already does this. This is like
it's like when you want to get your Cheetos at midnight at the hotel, you go punch A6 and you get your fentanyl.
Well, they have. Well, this is what. Oh fuck! What's the product that ESO has?
Narcbox?
Yeah, this is Narcbox.
No, it's not. This is not Narcbox. No, this is not Narcbox. They're literally talking about like the machine, like the Pixis machine. Not
but doesn't Narcbox have a Pixis type component?
Well, yes, it does.
Yeah, so if you're in your station and you've got the Narcbox piece and you're like, oh, I need to refill the fentanyl on the rig, and you just go bloop, 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 and it dispenses it and you put it on the rig. That's what I read this to me.
But I'm gonna have to disagree with you on that. That's
okay.
No, I mean, so we'll talk about, we're not endorsing one thing or the other, just so you know, but so my agency is going to Narcbox. So we have a Narcbox HQ lives in the logistics building, and we have RFID. And so when we have I'm just going to use a fentanyl, we get a fentanyl in, we wrap it with a RFID, beep, we scan it into the machine. Now the system knows that we just put a fentanyl in here. Okay. So when I need a fentanyl at the station, at the box level, I'm going to put in, this is what we used. This was the run number that we used it on. This is how much we used. This is how much I disposed of. Boom. Perfect. So our logistics has a live running thing that says, oh, looks like Mikey V used a fentanyl. So they go in, they get into the narc box, beep, beep, beep. They do their code and their thumbprint. They pull it out. They scan it that says this drug is out of the safe, but it's in limbo right now. So they scan it into the box, the narc box that's on their delivery vehicle. So now it's accounted for. They drive it to the station. They scan it out of that box, and then they scan it into the fire engine. And then that whole transaction is being recorded in real time.
Yep.
Right?
But
so
to me,
I don't think of that as an automatic dispensing system.
But the box that you got it out of at the HQ box,
right?
To me, I think of that as an automatic dispensing system.
I feel like, somebody help me out here, because that he ain't right on this. This is literally like Pixis. Like I go push A6 and the fentanyl is distributed to me and I go put it in my safe. That's what I think of that as. Anyway, we could talk for hours about it, but I don't know if we're talking about the same thing. Do you want to fight about it?
To me, it seems the way I read this was you either got to put a fucking safe on the wall or you got to buy this. You got to buy something specifically constructed to do this.
I don't know. You know, I love you though.
I know.
Yeah.
I love you too, man.
Right here. All these people in the comments are like, man, Ratu is crazy.
They're not saying that.
He's crazy. He's crazy. All right, let's move on to the next one. And I got two things working here. All right. Delivery. The DEA proposes that medical directors, hey, you're famous. You're famous. You're in here.
Yep.
All right. DEA proposes that medical directors determine who accepts deliveries of controlled substances because medical directors provide oversight for EMS agencies. Specifically proposed would require that the delivery of controlled substances at a registered or designated location be accepted by a medical director of the agency or a person designated in writing by the medical director. That seems fairly reasonable to me.
See, that seems a little odd to me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That you can't designate Mike Verkest to receive your drugs on your behalf?
But when it says at a designated location, so
registered or designated, yeah,
right. So does that mean that when my battalion chief takes the thing out of the logistics and brings it to the station, the only person that can accept it from the at that station from the battalion chief has to be one of the people that is approved by me?
See, I don't read it like that, but I tend to oversimplify things. That's one of my faults. It's I don't read that at all. I'm like, it just says that somebody that when McKesson or whoever delivers the truckload of fentanyl, someone needs to be there, and it's either going to be you or it's going to be a person you say can accept that delivery.
And that, if it would have just said registered location, that's how I would have read it. But when they said registered or designated location, I was a little more concerned about that. In which case I would then like designate every crew member to be able to accept that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if you're using a narc box, or if you're using a situation where the person who delivers it from the designated registered location to the designated location is putting it in a dispensing machine, there's really nobody accepting it there, right?
True. It's literally a one person. That whole process I described is like a logistics person going, well, sort of. I mean, not everyone has access to the main HQ, right? But that person is going to pull that out, and they're going to maintain that custody of that thing all the way through. And then when it gets to the fire station, for example, typically it's just checked into that box, closed up. No one has to come out and participate in that. But
well, nobody has to be the except. So that's to me, that's something that needs to be fleshed out.
Yeah.
How much of this is impacted on that logistics delivery kind of piece?
Yeah.
And it seems to me, again, I support their goal to not have diversion. There's more about what records you have to keep to do this. And so it seems to me that if you're going like scan in, yeah, I would suspect though too that if you're doing that whole process with only one person seeing the product the whole time, that they would have a problem with that.
Well, I don't know if that's going to necessarily be the case, because at least in the circumstance of a narc box, right? When that person checks it out, from the moment it is out, from the moment it's out until it gets checked into the delivery vehicle, it's in limbo, right? But we're always going to know where it's at. It went from the HQ to delivery truck 7, and then it's in delivery truck 7, and then it goes to the fire station. It's checked out of delivery vehicle 7 and checked into engine number 7, and so it's never lost. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's always accounted for. And at the end of the day, if it is, if it was expecting to have a delivery and it doesn't show up, then that's something that is tracked on the narc box thing as well. Right. So
what prevents somebody from taking that product though and adulterating it if they're the only one there?
Well, I mean, that could happen now anywhere. Right.
Oh, it happened. I've been involved in a situation where it happened many, many, many years ago.
Yeah, well, I think that comes down to having your written controlled substance plan, and which requires randomized, testing. So you literally, not on people, but you literally go out and you grab 5 or 6 fentanyl throughout your fire district or your rigs, and you replace them, and then you send them out testing, right? And that's not required. No, but that's one hat tip I will give to accreditation is you think about ways to better yourself, right? Better ways to improve the system.
And I think at the end of this, that was one of my take homes, and I'll mention it now, is that at the end of the day, whatever passes through here, this is the floor. You got to do these things. If you have a problem, the DEA is going to hold you accountable and responsible. Yeah. And so your best way to not have a problem is to have a strong plan that probably exceeds even these floor requirements, so that you can prevent diversion. Yeah. And diversion is going to happen at many places. I mean, it's just a fact of life. Yeah. Not because people are bad it's because people who have addictions have to feed that addiction. Yeah. And the addiction is pretty freaking sneaky. And so you have to start thinking about the addiction and how it acts when you start making your plan. Yeah. But again, so these are like the entry level criteria.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
nothing that says you can't have stronger oversight than what's in these rules.
Yep. So that second one there just says basically for record keeping purposes, the delivery of controlled substances the proposed rules would require the medical director of the agency or designated person accepting the controlled substances to provide a signature, title, date, received, quantity, and any additional information that be required. That's probably not much different than it's currently working for most agencies.
In the chat, a bunch of people said, well, just say any paramedic. I think we have to wait and see whether the DEA requires that to be a title or or a specific person by name.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's one of those questions.
Yep. Agreed. All right. Next one. This one is authorization, and I've got a big old boldy, yellowed, highlighted, underlined, italicized, the whole 9 yards. Okay. Authorization. An EMS professional who is outside the physical presence of a medical director for authorizing medical professional must not only have authority from their EMS agency to administer controlled substances, but such administration must also be pursuant to a proper standing or verbal order issued and adopted by one or more medical directors of the agency as described below or as discussed below. So, do the protocols because you as a medical director sign our protocols. Does that cover this idea here, or is this going to be a new document that says, to whom it may concern, I, Dr. Ratusani, authorized paramedics of agency ABC to blah 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 whatever. What are your thoughts on that?
I think these are the protocols, and I think what I would probably do is take our existing protocols and just alter the upfront language to just basically say that these are our patient care protocols. They also authorize all of our approved paramedics to or EMT advanced and higher, whatever, to provide these as a standing order. So it's all right there. But hey, this says that you have to have medical direction and you have to have protocols.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah, baby.
That's pretty good.
I mean, that's really cool. That's really cool. And that it's in the federal law now.
Oh, totally.
That you got to have EMS medical direction.
You better have one. Shoot. And not no milk carton medical director.
That's right. Like me.
Oh. All right. Agency registration. While this proposed rule is allowing for new registration category for EMS agencies to handle controlled substances, many agencies already have obtained a separate DEA registration known as a mid-level practitioner-ambulance. This is what you were talking about before. As of 2019, November, there were 3,521 MLPAS registrants. I had no idea, and this wasn't really, I didn't even know there was such a thing as this, but it sounded like you were familiar with this term.
Yeah, it in certain states, an ambulance could apply for this, and I had a number of folks say to me, "Well, we have this, so we're not tied to the medical director like you talk about and worried about." But in fact, that MLP ambulance service was still attached to a medical director, and in this registration, you're still going to have a medical director. But and ultimately the medical director was still responsible. And so it was kind of this nebulous piece. And then the other piece was there were no, again, as we've talked about, there were no rules or regulations that specifically described what this meant. So if you had an MLP ambulance service, what did that mean? What were your storage? What was all that stuff? And it was not in great use. It was basically so this kind of this whole thing just acknowledges that the MLP ambulance service was there, but also understands that it really had no teeth behind it and had no structure around it.
Sure.
And that this would replace that.
Yeah. So it goes on to say the DEA assumes that all other the DEA assumes, right? Because they don't know, and that's fair. I like that. The DEA assumes that all other EMS agencies not registered as an MLP currently operate under the registration of another DEA registrant in one of two ways. A, the DEA registered practitioner, typically a licensed physician, serves as the medical director of the EMS agency. That's how we do it, right?
Yep.
Or for EMS agencies operated by hospitals, the agency will utilize that hospital's registration. In the latter case, hospital-based EMS agencies can continue to operate under the registration of their hospital after promulgate. Well, that's a big one, of this proposed rule.
Promulgation.
Thank you. In the former case, practitioners who serve as the medical director of an EMS agency may utilize a single registration for their personal place of business and EMS agency locations, or they may hold practitioner registrations separate from their personal place of business registrations for each EMS agency location that they oversee. Because this proposed rule allows for a medical director holding multiple registrations to transfer those existing registrations directly to one EMS agency, EMS agencies operating under this agreement will not need a new registration. However, for EMS agencies currently operating under the medical director's registered personal place of business, a new EMS agency registration for each state in which they operate will be required. Additionally, affected non-governmental EMS agencies must pay the $731 registration fee. That was a mouthful.
'Twas a mouthful. But so what I would anticipate with all my agencies is that I would just transfer the license to them.
Yeah.
And you know, what's interesting too, some stuff that's in there talks about like, you know, maybe there's one medical director with more than one, but when you were a DEA registrant and you ordered the medications on the 222 form, the stuff could only be delivered to the address on the 222. So we know, like, I remember when I was working on this on 2015, 2016, talking to Craig Manifold again, he was a partner on this, and he was like, yeah, I was serving as the medical director and DEA registrant for a couple of small agencies. So it was at my house, and like the stuff would come to my house.
Yeah.
Like the UPS dude would just drop it off on the porch.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. So this kind of hopefully prevents controlled substances from coming to your house.
Yeah, that's probably good. All right, the next one we've got a little bit of highlighting on, because this is the question that I had, which was sort of weird, and this seems to be sort of an issue operationally of how things would go. Okay, so more record keeping. For each dose of controlled substances administered or disposed of in the course of providing emergency medical services, the records must include, golly, here we go. The name of the substance, check, always do it. Finished form of the substance, check. The date the substance was administered or disposed of, easy, all day long. Identification of the patient, if applicable. So I imagine if one expired, there's no patient, right? But you still have to account for it. That's what they're talking about there. The amount administered, the initials of the person who administered the substance. And number 7, don't get it. Super confusing. What a nightmare. The initials of the medical director or authorizing medical professional issuing the standing or verbal order. The WTF on there is me, by the way.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure the DEA didn't put WTF there.
No, they didn't, but Mikey V did. And then the rest of it's pretty simple stuff. It does talk about 2 people, initials of the person who disposed of the substance and 1 witness of the disposal. So 2 people to dispose of. But let's head back to number 7 there. I don't get it. What's every single administration or disposal? You got to be shitting me.
Or disposal.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have to do that now. No. I mean, I'm talking like in the hospital, if I order, so they can't give it without a direct order from me, right? So I give them an order.
Nurses,
you know, just let me finish. You know, they give, you know, I tell them to give 50 mics of fentanyl. They give 50. There's 100 in the vial. They waste the other 50. I don't have to initial that the other 50 were wasted. So that's interesting. But again, the idea, yeah, this is the biggest kind of like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Number one, this idea of putting initials, none of this stuff is on paper anymore.
No.
So I guess we got to keep an idea that it's approved by the, And I think what they're trying to say is that because they're being done under standing orders, that there's some type of process that's going back and looking at, was it appropriate? Maybe that's it. I don't really know.
It says right on there that you need to initial them.
I know. What am I going to initial?
I mean, well, I know that's what I'm saying. Like, you're going to need to go back through and QA every single one. I don't hate it, but this is completely unrealistic. And I might add that somebody has very poignantly and politically correct explain that in the comments, where everyone needs to go after watching this and reading this and make your own comments on this document. But there are people who have already picked up on this, that's just not even feasible at all.
Yeah. And I think, and I don't know the answer. I mean, some people have already said maybe you can replace that with a quality improvement program, or so this is probably the biggest area of feedback that we're gonna need to discuss and have a sort of joint kind of, and we'll talk when we get to the feedback piece. I'll tell you what NAMSP is doing and how they're gonna handle it. This is probably the biggest. This is the biggest kind of red flag, yellow flag in the whole thing.
Yeah,
and it's a little bit of a like old school, like there's a piece of paper that you need to initial.
Okay. Yeah, okay. You're right.
I mean, I guess the question is, like, if I get a report every week that says these were the cases where some controlled substances, and I got to go through and click them, maybe that's not the worst thing in the world. I don't know.
Oh man,
it still sounds very much like
the way we did it in 1976.
Well, it just sounds very pencil whippy and not really
true. Like
not really a quality improvement program,
right? I guess that's the thing. Maybe we don't have enough context to understand what do you mean by this, and why is it important to them? We've already got standing orders. Those are signed. We have people authorized to use the medications. I don't understand having to sign off on every one of them. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't understand having to sign off on every disposal.
Yeah,
the medical director doesn't need to sign off on that.
No. All right, we've got a couple more slides. We're doing great, and we're doing way better on time than I thought we were going to.
Yeah, I think we'll be done in time for the Timbers game at 7, so that's perfect.
Neat. I didn't know they were playing. Anyway, logistics. For deliveries of controlled substances between designated locations and a registered location, except hospital-based agencies restocking at the hospital in which the agency is operating, the records must include 1, the name of the substance, finished form, the number of units or volume in finished form in each commercial container. So no more mixing stuff in your backyard and putting it in a Windex thing or whatever. The date of the transfer, the name and address of the designated location to which the substance is delivered. And then finally, the name and title of the person in receipt of the transferred substance. So that talks a little bit more about the logistics side, about how that's going to work out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit of a departure from what we do now, but I think our NARC box will help a little bit with that, because, and I'm just thinking out loud to myself here, like, we have fixed locations. We know that Station 7 is this address. The people that are working, it's probably not that big of a deal.
So again, I think if you read their justifications, and then there's a couple things that we didn't cover on this that I want to come back to, but if you read their justifications, they talk about kind of like once the controlled substance leaves the registered location, it being out in the wild, and this being a little more of concern to them. So I think the idea that you need to have kind of tighter documentation about the comings and goings is really kind of how they're trying to make up for it. And I do think that some of these commercially available tracking things, somebody mentioned operative IQ in this, which is what Lake Oswego Fire is starting to use. And I think operative IQ and NARCBox can work together sometimes. But using these kind of automated systems to track these things is going to be kind of key. For smaller agencies like rural and things like that, it might be, if you're a rural area, you might just have one station. Then it's easy.
Right. Yeah.
And then if there's a couple of places, you're probably going to need to keep a paper trail of that. Somebody asked about what's going to replace the 222. There is going to be a new form called the 224 that is EMS specific. I think is going to be for the ordering. I signed my 222s for AMR online, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. So there were a couple things I think that I wanted to mention too that we didn't really hit on. One, the idea of restocking in the emergency department.
Mm-hmm.
So that is an area that, like in Ohio, for instance, is a big part of how they manage these controlled substances. The rule and the law specifically allows restocking of controlled substances with the hospital stock.
Yeah.
It has ideas around how how you have to record that. If you restock, you have to notify like your own logistics people within 72 hours, a bunch of stuff like that. So that's another area where it was nebulous. Yeah. Nobody really knew if that was permitted, because we've always had this idea that registrants can't share stuff. Like I can't give stuff to you.
Right.
And so this is one where it's very clear that if you are on active EMS agency in service, that you may restock with the hospital supply. The other thing that exists in here that I think is super cool is that you can actually share controlled substances between registrants during a time of drug shortage. So suddenly, if we can't get any fentanyl, but our friend Benny is sitting on a ton of fentanyl because Benny likes to hoard the fentanyl for his ginormous fire department. If it's sort of declared to be in shortage and we have a plan and it's actually approved by our local office, Benny can now share that with somebody. Same thing. So shortage, natural disaster. Now it says with approval, you can't have, I don't think there's time logistically to get approval in a natural disaster. So that may be something, but the idea that agencies can share stuff is cool. Nick says, can a fire service share with the transport provider? I would say in the rules, the way they're written, if there's a drug shortage, if et cetera, but the fire service and the transport provider are going to be separate EMS agencies like they are now.
Joe Z also wanted to know, he said he's waiting for national associations to help with common language and talking points such as NAMSP, NAMT, and that is definitely in the works right now. And Dr. Sani, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a great segue. Thanks, Jay-Z. So how NAMSP is going to handle this is that those of you who are NAMSP members are going to receive an email in the next day or two. I just saw a draft of it over the weekend that basically we already pushed out to all our members. They're out. Go take a look, comment if you can. But what we're going to do is we want to get your comments directly to us. Also, actually preferred in a way. So we're going to send everybody at AMSP is going to receive a email with a Survey Monkey where you can go in and kind of put your concerns. We'll collate those. Our government relations folks are looking through them also. And we're probably going to convene meetings between the advocacy committee leadership, the association leadership, and Holland and Knight, and then kind of go through those comments and try to create a common response.
Yeah.
And then have NAMSP respond, but also then share that with all of our members so that they can respond with the same kind of set of concerns, so that we can create the way the process works. The the benefit to rules is that they're flexible. They don't require an act of Congress to change them. The downside is, while there is a process for promulgation of rules,
thank you.
The agencies have some autonomy, so they can take all of our comments and go, fuck off, we're good. This is what it's going to say. This is not a political topic. So some political topics, that's what happens. And just to use as an example, the current administration has relaxed a lot of environmental rules. No judgment, good or bad, it's bad. But so they put out, to change rules, they put out a draft rules that relaxes a bunch of them. There's a bunch of groups that oppose these. They flood them with comments and saying these are bad. And the administration's like, yeah, thanks for the comments, but we're going to do this anyway. So they don't have to listen to comments. But this is, again, not political. I think we all have the same goals, the DEA and us and our partners, which is to take care of patients and to not have diversion. And so I think having comments that are thoughtful, that are coordinated, and then hitting them with both quality and volume is going to be important. And I know you've got the last slide up coming up, but there are a couple comments up there already that are kind of dumb. And so you want to not dumb, that's fair. Comments that I don't agree with, that makes them dumb, right? So we want to flood them with comments that are beneficial.
Yeah.
So having a coordinated response to this is going to be really important.
Exactly. And so, I mean, you hit it right on the head. And I think it's important that we do comment, because when we don't, you're going to get stuff like this. Like, so if we're not telling our story, if we're not telling them the things that are important to us, this is what you're going to see. And this is directly copied and pasted out of a comment that's live right now on that site. And it says EMS personnel should be required to report and be monitored on their use of patient administration of scheduled medications to a registry board, much like the PDMP, in hopes to minimize overuse administration of medications. At this education level, medic, the overall whole person, okay.
Sorry, found in my head.
Yeah, is not considered in patient care. Sadly, in my experience, from a medical perspective, medics tend to medicate and over-medicate just for a, quote, smooth ride, so to say. Man, that chaps my ass.
So I was going to break that dude's femur and ask him if he wanted a smooth ride. Is that bad?
Makes no sense.
Well, all the data shows that we under-medicate. There's no data that IV pain meds during a transport create increased addiction. Right?
Yeah.
But that's, yeah, I mean, right now there's 7 comments. So that's like 14% of all the comments. And so we want that, and again, I mean, I really, to be honest, I was really pleased with these. I mean, to really have only one issue that is kind of jumps out it's pretty good. My screen is flickering.
Boy.
So I think these weren't bad. I mean, I think the issue around the medical director, initial everything is the big red flag.
Yeah.
And I get it that there's still, and I agree with the concept that there's still medical director accountability to some degree, but that's what we have. How do we do accountability as medical direction? I don't do it by reviewing every single chart. I do it by having quality improvement programs and by having standing orders and educational programs. And so this idea of like initialing every chart or every administration is a very like 1990s, 1980s kind of approach. That's probably the biggest issue. I do think I'll be interested in what other people think. I think the idea that the lack of any kind of just the lack of how do you store this on a vehicle is, I don't know. I mean, that's,
I guess we'll have to wait and see how that fleshes out. I mean, maybe that's a great comment. That's something that they need to think about. And again, coordinated comments, well thought out, important, but we need to make sure the stuff gets in there.
Yep.
So somebody asked, is this all scheduled drugs or only level 2? So it's 2 through 5. So all anything that we might carry. That's what it says.
Yeah. Jay-Z, you're wrong. Don't assume only level 2. It says right in there 2 through 5.
Yep. Anyway, so I've pinned, Nick, thanks for posting that. There's two links in the comments there. One is the paper, and it's really it's the same link. It's just a tab that you click. One is the actual rules as in beta form. And then the link right next to it is the comments. So you can click over to the comments and you can actually read the ones that have been submitted and submit your own there. So,
yeah. And if you're, if you're not a member of NAMSP, why not? You listen to our show or watch our show, and that means you're, probably a more interested EMS provider on kind of a lot of national issues. And so we would love to have you as a professional member. But if you're a member of NAMT or you reach out, or IAFC or IAFF, reach out to your professional organization. We are at NAMSP going to reach out to them as part of this process too, just to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page. But this has been a great experience in the terms of all of the EMS community has been lockstep, working together. There have been other situations where we've been sort of less in lockstep on. I can't really talk about them, but this experience has created such positive relationships that it's easier to say, hey, we don't quite agree with this thing or that thing, and not necessarily take it personally and try to figure out instead how to meet everybody's needs, which is what you're supposed to do, right? So I think it's been a really great experience, and I look for NAMT and ASAP and the fire chiefs and firefighters to potentially also have opportunities for their members to be involved. And if not, once NAMSP makes their response public, it'll be public. So we'll share it with everybody too.
Yeah. And one thing Nick brought up, and he said he didn't know this until he listened to us, was that you don't have to be a physician to be part of NAMSP. So I'm a member. I know a lot of other paramedics and EMTs that are a member as well. So if that's not clear as a bell to you, it should be now, right? You do not have to be a physician to be involved with NAEMSP. I mean, shoot, I'm on one of the education work groups, communication work group. So not only am I a member, but I'm actually pretty involved in stuff. So Phil Moy actually might disagree with me a little bit, but I try. I'm so busy. I try to get in there and do stuff. But anyway, yeah, you absolutely don't have. If you're an EMS, you should definitely belong to NAEMSP. You need to belong to something, whether it's NAEMT, NAEMSP. My preference, I'd love NAEMSP, and it's been awesome for me. So
I'm a member of like all of them.
Yeah, I think
I'm a member of ASAP, NAMSP, and NAMT. So.
I think I'm NAEMT and NAEMSP, but nonetheless, get out there. All right. So is there any last things there, buddy, before I get this out of here?
No, I think again, this is 5 years of work.
Yeah.
6.
Exactly. And there'll be more to come. So, but definitely do us a favor, share this video with people that you think would be interested in learning more about this. The actual audio podcast, I might try to move this one up a little bit if we can, because I think it's timely. It's very important. We've got a couple more in the can, but we'd like to get this audio podcast out to people as soon as possible. Sometimes that's a little bit easier to share. But this is going to be on the YouTube channel as soon as we're done here. So you can share the video that's on YouTube. If it's easier to share Facebook or Twitter, then it's going to be in all those places. So anyway, is that it, buddy?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, I will get us out of here and we'll just do our thing. On behalf of Dr. Ritu Sani, Mike Verkest, you've been listening to and watching the Second Shift podcast. We are a proud member of the Flight Bridge Podcast Network
and a Fire Dog production.
All right. We will see you guys later. Have a great night. Have a great weekend, and we will see you soon.
See you soon. Bye.